Bruce, I wanted to ask you something that's always puzzled me about you. I've read about you for years, and you started out in politics on the far left with the Students for the Democratic Society under the name of Lynn Marcus, I believe. You were in the Columbia University protest movement.
1968.
1968. What caused you, and I guess you wouldn't object to being called a part of the right wing right now, would you?
Well, it depends on what they mean by that. As a conservative, American conservatism, as opposed to the European use of the term conservative, I would accept that. I'm a constitutional traditionalist.
All right, but did you have a change in your whole philosophy? Was there some revelation? What happened?
No, well, first of all, the left-wing thing is exaggerated. That's where the problem starts. We actually slid into SDS, not by intent, but as a matter of tactics, because we were determined, a group of friends of mine and I, were determined to combat the New Left on its home terrain and to deal with the entire left problem, because many good people were being drawn into the anti-war movement. These were people who were being drawn into this countercultural process, which SDS was part of. Therefore, we said, let's get in there, since I thought the Vietnam War was a travesty, for somewhat different reasons than the left did, but nonetheless a travesty. Let's get in there. Let's represent a positive policy on the Vietnam War question, and let's win people away from what I consider, and we consider at that point, a terrible thing.
Now, there are some people who claim that even today you are an agent of the KGB, that they support your operation. And as you know, as a student of Bolshevik history, the Bolsheviks and their intelligence apparatus have supported supposedly right-wing groups, the famous Trust in Russia.
Francois Genoux, the head of the Nazi International in Switzerland, is a good example.
All right. Are you part of that tradition?
Now, the Soviets fear me I'm not. The Soviets fear me. There are people, apart from idiots in the street, or people out of ignorance and paranoia will suspect that. But there are people like Robert Moss and so forth who spread that nonsense. They ought to know better, because they have enough access to intelligence to know what the Soviets really think about me. The Soviets consider me, perhaps with some exaggeration, the intellectual author of the SDI, and have some intelligence to know what the Soviets really think about me. The Soviets consider me, perhaps with some exaggeration, the intellectual author of the SDI, and have some intelligence to know what the Soviets really think about me. The Soviets consider me, perhaps with some exaggeration, the intellectual author of the SDI, and have screamed about that.
That's the Strategic Defense Initiative, yes.
And not without reason, but they may exaggerate my influence somewhat on that, being Soviets. They consider me the most dangerous individual not in a government position in the world today from their standpoint.
Now, you mentioned Robert Morse, who, with Arnaud de Bourgrave, wrote a famous book called The Spike. You are not sympathetic to Robert Morse, correct?
Neither one of them.
Or de Bourgrave.
I think de Bourgrave is easier. De Bourgrave is the fellow who's come under the suspicion.
He's now the publisher of the Washington Times.
But he's the fellow that comes under the suspicion of being your Soviet right-wing, conservative Soviet agent because of what he did, or his whole life history is of that type. He actually has been, and Moss have been, agents of Soviet disinformation, even though they were the authors of the Spike.
Let me ask you this, very, very brutally, very frontally. Were you ever a Marxist in your own opinion, ever?
I don't know.
Yes or no?
I don't know, because that the question does not lend itself.
Let me ask it this way. Are you today a Marxist?
I'm an expert on Marx, but I would not be considered a Marxist.
You were not. At what point did you change from the I don't know to no? And what changed you?
Oh, I would say in the 1950s.
In the 50s. This is nothing to do with the Vietnam War.
No,
this Eisenhower administration. It was what?
No. I became involved with the Socialist Workers' Party, a Trotskyist organization.
Which is not right-wing, hardly.
But
very
largely because of my opposition to what we called McCarthyism in that period. Then in 1954, I had a chance to see the leadership of the Socialist Workers' Party at somewhat close range, and saw something which I abhorred, and that was the end, essentially, as far as I was concerned.
So that's when you made that switch. Now, you have said recently something...
And I never agreed with Marx as an economist.
Something has broken loose in the American political process, unquote, indicating that you're going to find what that is and exploit it and fix it. What has broken loose in the American political process?
For the past 20 years, increasingly, the American population has been retreating into personal recreational foxholes. The television watching habits and the content of television programs, the way in which sports activities habits are used by the population indicate a retreat from reality into narrow concerns with immediate personal life and recreation.
Too much television.